My name's Dusty. I'm one of the pastors here, but also do want to give a welcome to friends and family. I've even seen some folks that I haven't got to catch up with in years that were here supporting some of their family, and just a lot of fun. So thanks for being here. It makes it even more special. So we're starting a new series today. We've been pretty much this whole school year, basically, we've been in the book of Romans, and we're starting something new today that we're going to do all the way through the summer, and it's the Sermon on the Mount. So this is Jesus' sermon, and I'm going to, along with other leaders here, going to do the best we can over this summer to communicate the heart of what Jesus is getting at. And it's a really interesting sermon because it falls at a really unique time in what God has been doing in human history, because he hasn't gone to the cross yet. Jesus has not, and hasn't been resurrected from the dead, which is the real central point. And so one of the things you're going to see, this is just a way to maybe help you understand and interpret the whole Sermon on the Mount, is that Jesus is announcing like the values of God and the values of heaven, of what will be. And after everyone who loves Jesus dies, and or till whenever Jesus returns, we see the values of God. And but it doesn't necessarily tell us like how. Jesus isn't going to say, "Hey, here's how you change, and here's how you get this heart and perspective." He's just announcing what is at the very front end of his teaching ministry and life and all of that. Like he's communicating this. And so you have to understand that the cross and the resurrection, and then the Holy Spirit given to God's people is the how, the grace of God and the presence of God. That's the how of how we change. But he's not walking you through all of that. He's simply announcing the values of the kingdom. So I want to just make that clear. Also, a couple of other special days today that I want to acknowledge, even on the front end of this sermon, on the Sermon on the Mount, that we have. I want to just acknowledge moms that are here. We love you. This is such a special day, and a lot to celebrate with some of the gifts that we have to this church and to children and grandchildren. You are awesome. We love you. I also want to acknowledge that that Mother's Day, I've seen studies on this, is the most dodged Sunday of the entire year. And for a lot of reasons, is that for some of us that maybe have an estranged relationship with a mother, or a mother that's passed away, or you're struggling with infertility, or you've lost a child. Like in the life of this church, all of those things have happened, all. And so, in fact, there's some of you that it's both. Like it's a day to celebrate, you're so grateful, and you're sad. And I just want you to know you're seen, and seen by God, most importantly, but we see you, and really consider it a privilege that you'd be here. One last group I want to acknowledge before we jump into the Sermon on the Mount is also want to acknowledge graduates. So I don't know if we've got any of you that are here, but let me just clarify. No, we're not doing any of that kindergarten graduation stuff or middle school graduation. That didn't even count. It's not real. So they look cute and all, but it's not real. So if you're graduating like high school, college, law school, master's, med school, something like that, all right? So like a legit accomplishment, all right? High school, college, y'all follow me? If that's you, would you mind just standing so we can acknowledge you here? Anybody here graduate? I'm curious. Anybody? Come on, I see a couple people. Maybe there you go. Let's go. Good job, guys. Good job. Well done. It's a big deal. So a lot to celebrate today. So we're going to jump into this. I just want to kind of highlight a couple of things that we're going to see as we read. These are sometimes called the Beatitudes, the first 12 verses of Matthew. And really that root word there is, the Beatitudes is blessing. And I think one thing we probably need to do on the hashtag blessed life, because you're just going to see a string of things. Jesus is going to say, blessed is the one who this, and blessed is the one who that, and blessed is the one who this. And but we just need to acknowledge, I think what I'm going to start with is what we don't mean by that, just to give you a way to read this. And then we're going to talk about what we do mean. So what we don't mean by this is I think our culture has its own Beatitudes, its own ways of the hashtag blessed life. And I think most of them usually center around affluence and, something along the lines of money and success and, being free from any kind of hassles and problems, so comfort. That usually is kind of the Americanized version of Jesus' Sermon on the Mount on this first part about what the blessed life is. And, if you've got enough money and you got enough entertainment, enough fun things, and nobody making you do things you don't want to do, that's the blessed life, and that's incredible. And maybe another way of saying it, if you just want to kind of flip the language a little bit, is if I were to ask a question, my life would be so much better if only, and then fill in the blank. And what would you put in that blank? My life would be so much better if only what? And most of the time, what we tend to put in these blanks are, man, if we just had a little bit more cash, things would be so much easier. Or, man, I've got this problem relationship with my boss or an employee or coworker. Or there's an element that is just really unstable in my family that's causing me some grief. And if that was stabilized, then I would feel better. And so it's usually something that would make your life easier. And a lot of times it's money, and a lot of times it's comforts. And so I just want to acknowledge, like, it's hardwired into us. That's what we think that we need, that's what would be the blessed life. And this is what's so interesting about Jesus' teaching, is he's going to turn a lot of this on end and say, yeah, do I bless with material things? Sure, like anything you have. You have breath in your lungs. You've got money in your account to buy Moto Medi for lunch today, whatever it is. Like you've got whatever you've got, then that's a gift of God, and that is a blessing in a way. But it's not anywhere close to like the deepest kind of blessing in the blessed life. So that's what it's not. Now let me specify what it is, and then we're going to jump into this. I think the best way to understand what Jesus means by blessing is what one commentator that I heard recently talked about is the flourishing of people in God. The flourishing of people in God. That's the blessing right there. Is what does it mean for human beings to flourish? That there would be a flourishing among us, and there's certain attitudes, there's certain perspectives that cause a certain kind of flourishing. And then the opposite of that would be that there's certain kinds of attitudes and perspectives and lifestyles that actually take that away from us. That the flourishing that we can have in God is actually absent, and the opposite of that is that we kind of wilt. And so Jesus is going to say, here's what the values of the kingdom of heaven are. Here is what flourishing in God looks like. And you can just see snapshots. And it's very different than our own hashtag blessed life, again, a prosperity and a hassle-free designer life. All right, so let's read the first two verses to set all this up. So this is in Matthew chapter 5, verses 1 and 2. You can follow along on the screen, or if you've got a copy of the Bible in front of you, you can do that as well. Matthew chapter 5. Seeing the crowds, this is Jesus, went up on the mountain, and he sat down. His disciples came to him, and he opened his mouth and taught them, saying. So this is why it's called Sermon on the Mount. Coincidentally, just so you know, that Luke has a kind of a slightly different version of this, and it's sometimes called the Sermon on the Plains. And it could be Luke's version of this sermon, although the location's different. It wouldn't be surprising if Jesus delivered a version of this sermon more than once. That whenever you're going around and delivering messages as almost like an itinerant teacher, which is also, that wasn't all that he was, but he was doing a lot of teaching. It wouldn't shock you that he would use some of the same basic ideas, announcing the kingdom in multiple spots. It also could be compilation of different sermons. People have different views on this, but I think probably the best view is that Jesus delivered a version of the sermon probably more than once. Check this picture out, just so you can see. This would be a really cool location for a sermon, don't you think? So I think this isn't too bad. This is where he's delivering this message there. That's where that happens. All right, so now he's saying, all right, disciples, gather around me. I'm going to tell you what it means to flourish. Like, everybody wants to flourish. Every person here in this room, I guarantee you, and the people back then, like, you want your life to be good. And you want it to count for something. And you want a sense of happiness, a sense of fulfillment, a sense of meaning, and flourishing. That's what that means. And he's going to say, here's what it looks like. Here's this life in God. So here you go, verse 3. Blessed, or flourishing, are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed is the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Now, in Luke's version of this, again, maybe a different sermon at a different time, on the Sermon on the Plains, it just says, blessed are the poor. Blessed are the poor. And I don't think we need to see these things at odds there, because I think that the reality is someone that is financially poor could be very dependent on God. They could realize, Lord, if you do not give me my rent money this month, like, I'm out. Like, I'm going to go work. I'm going to do all I can, but I need you to provide, and I don't know how we're going to make ends meet. And someone that is financially poor could be very dependent on God. But could we also agree that someone who doesn't have any money and that is really kind of paycheck to paycheck and trying to make it, or even on the streets, that they could be also very very proud. They could be greedy. They could be, they don't have any money, but they would think that all their problems would be solved if they had money. And so what Jesus is saying here is that there is a blessing that could come along with someone that's poor, that understands their dependence on God. That could be a beautiful thing. But here, poor in spirit goes like a layer beneath that. This is saying, regardless of how many commas and zeros you have in your bank account, you could be really rich, you could be really poor, you could just be flat out middle class, right in between. But it's more of an attitude and more of you can think humility. And this will come up really in these first few verses. I think this comes up a lot, is a sense of dependence on God, and that I'm not up here and everybody else down here, but a sense of like, look, man, I've been given a lot of gifts by God, and I depend on God, and just a low road of humility in someone. And just to be straight with you, man, like I'm always shocked when I see it in action, because my experience with just human beings, and whether you're talking about church work, which is what I do, or you could be a coach, you could be in business, you could be with a group of stay-at-home moms that meet up and kind of organize some things and whatever. It doesn't matter, like whatever, because people are involved in every one of those things. My experience generally is that people will wield whatever power that they could have at their disposal, even if it's like, hey, I paid good money for this, and if you don't take this steak back, I'm going to put a review on Yelp. And like that's a use of power. And like we usually take our power and we put it in for the full degree of whatever it is that we can. And I'm shocked whenever there's like a really truly humble response, especially when someone is gifted and has a sense of courage and strength to go along with it. I'll give you just a quick example of this that was just shocking to me. Like it's really arresting when you see humility play out like this. But we work together with a lot of the churches we've planted, and then now they've planted churches over the years called the Redeemer Network. And the other day that our director of our Redeemer Network, a guy named Brandon Barker, said that he wanted to make some tweaks. We like to replant churches. That's something newer that we're doing, which is a church that's dead or dying, that may have facilities, but wants to kind of relaunch itself and come back as a new church, basically, and a service to them, which is a big deal in West Texas and beyond. And but he had an idea on like a better way to talk about that, and something that could really bring it into the main stem of how we're doing things with the Redeemer Network. So I'm not going to bother you with the organizational part, but the guy that really founded this ministry is a guy named David Miller, a really cool guy, helped replant a church up in Abernathy, and is like founded a bunch of businesses, like a really smart, gifted dude. And we were just kind of wondering how that was going to go when Brandon offered this like tweak to how it would like be organized. And my experience is expect resistance, right? That somebody's gonna be like, "No, man, I started this," and "No, you're not," and all that. But what was interesting is that when I think of someone as gifted and smart and able as David Miller is, that he just listened and he took the thing in, and instead of feeling like he needed to defend his thing, he just listened and is like, "That's a great idea. I think we should do that." That is like he was just listening to the idea instead of feeling like he needed to defend it. It's this poor in spirit, humility where you're curious, you're listening, you're asking questions and wondering what the best thing is, and not from a filter of, wait, will this diminish my influence? Did you not like the first idea? You're able to have just this low ego. And it was so shocking that another one of our leaders called me right afterwards and was like, "What just happened?" Like, that is just incredible, because I'm telling you, like, it just doesn't happen. Whether you're in business or anything else, that people tend to flex whatever kind of influence that we tend to have. And so blessed, you flourish if you're poor in spirit. Okay, let's move to the next one. Verse 4, blessed or flourishing are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. So this has a lot of different elements to it about when we talk about mourning. And it could be something like where you've really lost something. Like the other day, I was actually staying in Allen, right across Central Expressway from where that shooting was. In fact, we almost went there on the way to a baseball tournament, and we ended up going to Best Buy instead. But it was like we heard about it at the baseball field, the shooting. And it was, I think we all felt that one, but they felt it. Like that was right there. People worked and lived right there, and it's just like, what just happened? And there's this sense of like God drawing near to the brokenhearted, about either people affected by tragedy or even just people that are nervous about like, what kind of world are we living in? And I'm raising children in this world. And Lord, how are you going to intervene? And Lord, we need you to work. That there's this sense of, to the brokenhearted, of someone that's reaching out and saying, God, I am sad. Like I don't know what to do, and I'm hurting right now, that God draws near to you. And so I just want you to know this. It doesn't have to even be a shooting, but you're mourning because you've got a kid that's struggling. You're mourning because your marriage it feels like it could kind of go either way, or you've lost someone that you love, or this is even maybe reminded to you on Mother's Day, or whatever the case is, like you're sad, you're lonely, that God draws near to you, that there's a flourishing to those who mourn, and even reach out to God in the middle of your loss, that he sees you and cares. I just want you to know that. But even beyond that, someone else that mourns is that you're admitting weakness, you're admitting vulnerabilities. There's this mourning even for your limitations, and that God draws near. There's a flourishing when we say, I do not have what it takes all the time. Like, I'm limited, I need sleep, I get fatigued, I get kind of cranky, I get whatever it is, and just acknowledging sin, acknowledging weakness, acknowledging vulnerability, there's a flourishing. And this is so hard because typically we like to project strength to strength and not weakness. And I love this. It's just so, can you see again, the kingdom values are so different than our own Beatitudes of our day that would say, let's be strong, let's be rich, let's be powerful, let's be successful, let's not have any hassles, let's have enough things that nobody can get into your life that you don't want there. It's like, no, you'll flourish if you mourn. It's okay to be sad, and God draws near to you. Verse 5, blessed or flourishing are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. This is really pulling together from the last two verses, is again this idea of humility. And there's something of gentleness here, and someone that takes that low road. Again, don't think pushover, because you're about to see this in the next verse. Don't think pushover. Don't think an absence of courage. That you could be very, very strong and someone that fights for what's beautiful and right, but at the same time humble and easy to work with and kind. That this is the meekness. And I think Jesus exemplified this in a beautiful way. All right, next verse 6. Blessed or flourishing are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. So I mentioned this a second ago, but this is why we're not just talking about sugary, sweet people that just are kind of like wanting to be, to say whatever people want to hear. And no, you can go to lunch wherever you want to go. Sure, if you want to go eat there, that's fine. And whatever everybody else wants, that's not the profile. He's not saying pushover and people pleaser. Here you have someone that's hungering and thirsting for righteousness. This could be on a personal level of someone that's just aching for, Lord, I want to see your values and the values of the kingdom. I want my mind to be transformed, and I want to reflect you and how I live. And I see areas that are out of alignment, and I don't like how I interact with my spouse, and I don't like how it is that I handled this situation the other day. And I want holiness, and I want to reflect you, and I want to know you in that way. It could be personally, but it could also be societally. Think about Jesus' model prayer that he taught his disciples, and that we pray, Father, hallowed be your name. And then this next part of it is that your kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. And so where we see injustices in this world, where life is not valued and protected, where there's racism, where people that are vulnerable are not protected and not seen, that there's this hungering and thirsting of like, that isn't right. And I would even make a case, just as an aside, that the fact that there's so many people that really do value justice in our society that have kind of severed themselves from like the Christian worldview, but it's the Christian worldview that even raises the question of injustice. Because without it, what does it even mean like for things to be right or wrong, really, like on a real fundamental level? But when we look at the Bible and we see the Bible define what's right and wrong, and we have a category here for injustice that we say, man, this isn't right. And you may work politically towards that. You may work personally towards that. You may work in a lot of different ways, but you want to see God's kingdom and his values come to earth as it is in heaven. There's a hungering and thirsting for righteousness that goes along. So I see courage along with this meekness. And this is the life that flourishes. And I just think that's beautiful. Verse 7, blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. I love this, that mercy. What a beautiful marker. If you want life that flourishes, that yes, we want justice, but I would think the thing that you're going to want to typify your life more than anything else is mercy. Is someone has done you wrong, and the temptation is going to be to stick it to them and to write them off, cut them off. And I realize there are times where you cut off a relationship. I get that. But it's like last resort. And I remember a long time ago, my wife and I were at a wedding of this is back when she was in med school, I think. And we were at a wedding, and they're going around with a roving camera, kind of saying, hey, what's your advice for the new couple? And Amy had like a phrase. She said, give grace. Give grace. Now, she'd been married to me, so you can see why she would say something like that. So, but she had a lot of opportunities for that. But give grace, is that there's some things you're like, I don't think I'm gonna confront that, you know. And I've got some things that are probably equally annoying and more so, because that's usually where these things start, are just things that we're annoyed by, where they're just different than us. And okay, you've even hurt me. I'm going to mention it to you. I'm going to say, ouch, that actually really hurt when you said that. I'm going to mention that we're friends here, or you're married, or whatever the case is. I'm like, that hurt. But then when even before they ask, we've already forgiven, you know. That there's incredible, like a great mix, like a recipe for a great marriage is mercy given quickly. And I'll be straight with you, man. Like, I'm shocked when I see it in action. In the same way that I'm shocked when someone doesn't use their power and influence to the nth degree. Like, I'm shocked whenever you see humility in action that plays out in compassion and mercy towards someone that they've been wronged, and they choose to forgive, and they choose to build a bridge, and choose to think the best and not in the next situation immediately assume ulterior motives. It is shocking when you see mercy in action, because it just doesn't happen. It's a beautiful thing, and God's saying that's where we flourish, where grace is, because here's the thing, is that if you understand your own spiritual need, then you understand that is the case for everybody you know. Everybody you know also similarly are knuckleheads cracked in the head. We talked about that from Romans. That's theological truth. And so that if you know that's true and that you need grace not only for salvation but just to make it today, then that's exactly what they need. And it makes it really easy when they offend you and they hurt you and their issues affect you, that it makes it really easy to extend grace that way, because that's what God has done with you like a million times over and over again. Verse 8. Blessed, flourishing, are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. I love this because this would be maybe a couple of ways of thinking about this. One way would be in contrast to a lot of religious people in Jesus' day who externally look good. They might even do like scrubbing like a surgeon, and that would make them like ceremonially clean. And they're like, no, I'm pure now because I've like washed my hands in the right way. You're like, no. What about that lustful thought in there? And what about that lack of mercy extended to your friend? And what about your dishonesty with money? And what about, whatever? And he's saying, no, what? The purity of the heart, that's where the flourishing comes in, purity of the heart. Now, let me say it one other way. Soren Kierkegaard made this case, that the purity of the heart is to will one thing. And that's the only way our hearts can be pure, is to will one thing. And the only way you can will one thing is if that thing is Jesus Christ, because your heart is always going to be divided. So it can be divided as I kind of want Jesus and I kind of want the world, and I live there too much, and I bet you do too, which is why I sometimes don't flourish. But even if you're like, I don't even want Jesus, so I'm going to will one thing, and that's me. But even that one thing that you might want, the world, you, all that, is going to be divided. Like, you're going to want lots of things. I want people to think I'm a nice guy, but I want to get ahead. I want to have an easy life, but I want to be crazy rich. And you're going to find yourself torn, even if you fully decide to go all in to live for yourself. There's just always this disunity of the heart. The only way to have unity of the heart is to will one thing, which is Jesus. And when that heart is purely focused on Jesus, you have this flourishing of the soul. That's how this whole thing works. There's a flourishing whenever there's a purity of heart. Verse 9, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. One commentator I read, Broadus, said, there is no more godlike work to be done in the world than peacemaking. And I find so little of it. If I were to give just a quick tip on peacemaking, it would be this. All the time, first of all, for you, advice would be, as far as it depends on you, again, this is a Romans thing, as far as it depends on you, be at peace with those around you. So if there's a messed up relationship, you can't always make that other person handle themselves in a good way. You can't control that, right? But what you can do is, as far as it depends on you, you can be at peace. You can have reached out. You could, hey, let's try to get this together. Maybe it goes badly. But you can't control their response. You can control your heart. You can control your forgiveness. You can control your efforts to try to make those things right. So that'd be the first thing. But man, lots of times you're going to have friends that will come up to you and say, man, I had this falling out. And my boyfriend broke up with me, or my good friends, we won't speak to each other anymore, or I just got fired this week, or who knows what. There could be all these things. And here's my one encouragement for you is just be curious. Just be curious, because what you can do, you can actually tilt that direction, that conversation, in a really negative or positive direction. If you are curious, you may even be able to help them come to a sense of understanding of themselves, and even be able to maybe reconcile with someone. So it's like, okay, so you had this big falling out. Tell me more about that. Hey, you got fired. So that was just really out of the blue? Like there was no conversations? Like they didn't do any kind of corrective conversation? There was no performance improvement plan, that you didn't have a conversation with another person, or that your boyfriend broke up with you. But tell me about that. I hadn't heard anything. Had y'all had some disagreements and whatever? Just be curious. Ask lots of questions. And one of the things you can do is you can understand that there's always a couple of perspectives, and then helping point people together anywhere you can, instead of they did what, all that kind of thing. And so you can inflame that, or you can help bring people together. Blessed, flourishing. Listen to me. Jesus' words, flourishing are the peacemakers. I'm not talking peace at any cost, but people that point people together as much as you can. And then I'm just going to read these last 3 verses together. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven, for so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. So Jesus just wraps this up and saying, hey, look, if you're persecuted for me, there's a flourishing here, that you can just trust me with this. And just to be really clear about this, it's not exactly the same to be persecuted for Jesus' sake versus having hot takes on the internet about your political ideology and people getting mad about it. Those are 2 different things, all right? So just so we're clear on that, if you want to have hot takes on the internet, you can do that. Just don't think you're being persecuted for Jesus' sake on this. But my experience for this is that it's usually pretty mild. People may not like some of your moral takes because of the teachings of Jesus that Christians hold to. That's probably the thing that I've experienced the most. But man, there are people around the world, a lot of the church and Christians in the part of the world where we send our goers to, that they lose their life because of following Jesus. They are excluded. We've had people that our goers have shared their faith with in the Muslim world that are kicked out of their families, that he's saying, hey, I know this doesn't seem like you're flourishing, but on a spiritual level, you're blessed and you're flourishing because of your commitment to me, and that God will see them all the way through. So here's the thing. Whenever we pull this together, here's how I would see this, is that Jesus is announcing kingdom values, and in some ways it reminds me of Romans 12:1 and 2, where Jesus said, or Paul says that, hey, we don't want to be conformed to the world, but we want our mind to be transformed. We want our mind to be renewed, and it's renewed if you fast forward through the cross and the resurrection. That's the how. Jesus isn't announcing the how here because he hasn't gone to the cross yet, but the how is the grace of God through Jesus, that our mind is renewed through Jesus' work on the cross and the resurrection, and we're not conformed to the patterns of the world with our own ways of getting the blessed life, but rather we're transformed, we're renewed by the kingdom values. As we look to God, as we consider the grace of God, our minds changed, and we have these countercultural values through what Jesus has done. And then the last thing I'll add is this, is that because we're talking about the kingdom values, it means there's something more after this world, because sometimes this is so hard for me to believe, is can you imagine the next life where there's nobody that's flexing their power and influence they've got? Can you imagine? Can you even imagine that? Can you imagine nobody projecting strength? Are you good? Yeah, good, blessed. That kind of thing, when their life's not crumbling, right? And nobody's chasing power. Nobody's loving money. Nobody's mistreating people. There's no more injustices. There's no more sex trafficking. There's no more little ones that are killed. There's no more anything. There's no more any of that. Can you imagine a world where there's not any more conflict, no people doing ugly things, nobody making someone feel small, no one using their physical strength to bully or intimidate, no more racism? Can you imagine no more splits and divides in our culture? Can you even imagine that? And here's the thing that's incredible, and I hope this just woos you if you're not a follower of Jesus, is that this is what's in store for us through Jesus. He came to make all of this right. Through his death and resurrection, he's going to come again. He's going to make a new heavens and a new earth. He's announcing the values of the kingdom to us right here. Someday he's going to make it right. And I just want you to be encouraged that it may feel very wrong. About 3/4 of the time, that's how it feels to me. It's like, this world, it's so sad and it's so broken. And you see these glimpses of beauty and grace and kindness. And someday, like that dawn is the way you can think about it. We have a dawn of grace now. Newton talked about this in his song, Amazing Grace. It's like this dawn of redeeming grace that we experience now. But someday, after we've been there for 1,000 years, this dawning grace is now going to be this blazing August Lubbock sun straight overhead. I realize the metaphor is getting messed up here because I don't like that. But like I'm talking about all the warmth that is just going to burn away all of the sad and broken, dark things in our world and in your heart and in your life, and all the things that you've lost, all the mourning that you've had. It's all going to be made right. Every last bit of it. And that's what Jesus is announcing here. Let me pray. Lord, thank you for that. Thank you for the hope of what will be, the values of your kingdom. And Lord, we are hungry to see these things break into our life, a different pattern of flourishing than our society offers, and we want your way. We know what our way gets us, and we want your way. And so, Lord, would you let it be so? And I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.